Let's see how we can check if two strings are rotations of each other. For example, if you have A, B, C, D and rotate it by one character to the right, we'll get D from the end and put it at the beginning. So we'll get D, A, B, C. If we rotate it by two characters to the right, we'll get C, D, A, B, because we'll get C from the end and add it at the beginning. That's why we get C, D, A, B. If we rotate it by three characters to the right, we'll get B, C, D, A. And finally, if we rotate it by four characters to the right, we'll get A, B, C, D, the same input. Do you see a pattern here? There are two things that I can observe immediately. The input and the output have the exact same length. They both have four characters. And the order of these characters is always the same. For example, D always comes after C. Here's another example. And another example. The only thing is that if we get to the end of the string, we have to start from the beginning, but the order of characters does not change. So even in the first rotation, D is still coming after C. Okay? So let's add a new method. Public static Boolean are rotations. We give it two parameters, str1, and let me put this on a new line, and str2. So first we check the length of these parameters. If they're not the same, we should return false. So if str1 dot length does not equal str2 dot length, then we return false. Now, how do we check the order of these characters? Well, one way is to find the first character of str2 in str1, then go forward and make sure all the subsequent characters are the same. When we get to the end of the string, we should start from the beginning. So we need 2 pointers to compare characters in these two strings. That's one way. But there is a better way. There's a simpler way. We can concatenate str1 with itself, and here we'll get something like this. ABCD, ABCD. So the same sequence of characters are repeated in the exact same order, right? D is after C, which is after B, which is after A, and so on. Now we can check to see if the string contains str2. So if we have these characters repeated in the same order, that means str2 is a rotation of str1. So let's add another if statement. If str1 plus str2. Let's wrap this in parentheses. So now we have a temporary string object in memory. Now we call the contains method on this string object and check to see if this string contains str2. If not, that means these strings are not rotations of each other, so we return false. And finally, we return true at the end. Now, there is a cleaner and more elegant way to write this code. We don't need multiple if statements. We can combine these into one Boolean expression. Let me show you. So we can return a Boolean expression like this. First, we compare the length of these strings. So if str1, the length, equals str2, the length, that means these two strings are potentially rotations of each other. Now we need a second condition. So and, here we concatenate str1 with itself, and then check to see if it contains str2. If both these conditions are true, that means str2 is a rotation of str1. So this one-liner is exactly equivalent to these few lines. That is better. Now let's test this implementation. So back in the main class, let's call string utils that are rotations. Here we pass valid arguments or valid strings that are rotations of each other. So ABCD and DABC. What do we get here? A Boolean. Let's store the result in a variable called x. It doesn't really matter. And then print x on the console. So we get true because these strings are rotations of each other. Now, what if we have an extra character here? Obviously, we get false. What if the order of characters are not the same? So we have DACB. Again, we get false. Beautiful. What if we pass an empty string? We get false as well. What if we pass null? We got a null pointer exception. So that is super easy to fix. At the beginning of our method, we check to see if str1 equals null or str2 equals null, we return false. So if either of these is null, we return false. So this is a simple way to check to see if two strings are rotations of each other. Now, what if the input string is really large? Let's say it has 1 million characters. As part of this concatenation, we need to allocate space for storing 2 million characters. That's a lot of space. So in that case, it would be better to use a for loop and compare the characters in both strings. I leave it up to you as an extra challenge. Next, we're going to look at removing duplicates in a string.